Good morning. Have you ever stood there thinking, should I put a filter on or not? Am I gonna ruin my image? Should you protect your lens with a UV filter? Use a CPL, ND? Should you cut out reflections? Do you need an ND at bright daytime or is it just overkill? Here's my unpopular opinion. Most people use UV filters for the wrong reason, and a cheap one can actually make your photos look a lot worse, even an expensive one, to say that. But there are other filters I absolutely swear by, and once you understand them, you'll stop guessing. In this video, I want you to learn exactly what each filter does. So for example, UV, CPL, VND, streak, etc. Plus how creative filters, like even mist one, can give you a cinematic look. And I'll give you my 3-second LIT method, so you can look at a scene and instantly know which filter to use and when to use nothing. All right, quick question before we dive in. Comment below if you are team filters or if you're team naked lens. Those filters you see are basically just optical tools that do one of three things: control light, control reflection, or change the vibe. Look, my name is Pierre Dinambert. I'm a travel photographer and the creator of the 30 Days to Great Photos step-by-step program that has helped thousands of photographers see, shoot, and edit with confidence so that they take photos they're proud of. To join more and learn about the training, you can check out the link in the description. But today I want to break down the glass together. Filter. Shoot. So we're gonna tackle first the technical filters. Let's talk about the UV filter, or like I like to call it, the fear filter. The fear filter, why is that? Because most people buy UV filters in order to put them on their expensive lenses because they're afraid of damaging the lens, which is what they're kind of intended to do. But there's a big caveat to that, is that they actually change how the light enters your lens and how the lens will perform. I'll explain a little more in a second why I actually don't use them unless in specific conditions. UV filters or clear filters are basically protection filters, and you can see through, depending on the quality and the coating, they're gonna be more or less transparent. The light will interact differently with it, but the main intention is to protect from, let's say, debris. You're in the sand, you're in the mud, you're getting splashed by tons of mud. It's a good time to put a UV filter. Or you get sprayed by water, salt water, you have kids who are trying to grab your lens with their fingers. That's a good time to put a UV filter. That's when it's very helpful for protection in difficult scenarios. After more than 10 years of being a professional photographer, I've scratched in my entire life one lens and one lens only, and I don't even know how I did it, and I don't wear UV filters at all on my lenses. They're always naked. Why? Because I want to get the best performance from my lenses. Let me explain. When you're putting a filter on top of your lens, you're actually you're adding a piece of glass on top of it. So you're changing how the light will enter, and you can be creating ghosting if you're shooting backlit, or your flare is going to completely change. So if you like the flare of your lens and now you add a filter on top, well, you're gonna change things up and it may not look as pleasing. On top of that, you could be diminishing a little bit the sharpness if you're not investing in expensive enough. And if you do invest in expensive enough and you leave it always on, you still have the ghosting and flaring problem. So unless you're in hard scenarios where it's pretty violent conditions, please save money. Don't use these filters. But please let me know in the comments, do you use UV filters, protection filters, or not at all? Now let's talk about my favorite technical filters of all times, the CPL, Circular Polarizer filter, which is right there. What it does is basically cuts out reflections and changes a few things. How it works is that the light comes in different direction, and depending on how you turn that filter, it will cut out the light coming in one direction or the other. Extremely helpful in which cases when you're trying to get rid of the reflection on cars, let's say, on windows, part of it, because it's hard to remove everything. Let's say on the water surface, the leaves in the forest, when it rained, this is extremely helpful tool to keep that deep green of the richness of the forest and not have something that looks very glary and with a lot of reflections everywhere. I absolutely love it. And then there's an added benefit to those filters, and I'll tell you what are the big caveats of them, because there's something you absolutely definitely need to know that can be pretty dangerous for your photos. The other advantage is that it boosts perceived saturation and contrast by removing that effective layer. So your photos with a CPL, when it's turned correctly or like in the way you want, can boost the saturation and the contrast. I personally love to use them in nature, on the beach, in the forest, and also in street photography because something really cool. It's gonna make your bright daytime blue sky a lot darker, so that blue sky is gonna get in the rich deep blues instead of being more in the washed out perceived thing. Now, big warning with CPLs is that when you're on a wide angle lens and if shooting with a lot of sky, what's gonna happen is that it can make uneven skies. So part of the sky can get like deeper blue and the rest of the sky is maybe, if you're on 16mm, it may not be the best filter for you on that specific shoot. But honestly, if that's an issue and you want to keep that filter, just shoot a little tighter, and that way that angle of the sky where you see that artifact a lot will be reduced. Now, it's a trade-off. Sometimes that little weirdness is not an issue and no one sees it, and that punch in the blues is something you want. But honestly, just crop in a little bit and you won't have that issue as much. The other drawback is that it kind of steals light, about 1 to 2 stops, which can be good for some or annoying for others, depending on the circumstances. If you're in low light, well, definitely a problem, but why would you use a CPL in low light? It doesn't always make sense to do so. In my opinion, it's a filter I use mainly in daytime. So how to use it? Simply, you screw it on your lens and then you rotate it and you see live at the back of your screen, like you can see how it's affecting your image. And it's up to you to choose how much you want to affect it or not. Some pros even use it to reduce the glare on people's faces when they're shooting. But if you go a little too far, apparently it looks a little plasticky. So try to keep it balanced. Now, all the photos you see are taken by me. It's not AI. It's not, stock photos. They're all been taken by me, edited by me with my Lightroom presets that are also available if you want them in the description. And there's something that's crazy on this video is that a lot of people watch video and never leave it a thumbs up, even though it helped them. So if it does help you a little bit what I'm sharing, leave it a big thumbs up. It will tell YouTube, hey, this video is actually helpful. Please spread it to others. Now, let's talk about the ND filters, the neutral density filter. What does it do? Well, I'm pretty sure you can tell already. It's basically like sunglasses for your camera. It reduces the amount of light that is entering your camera. And why would you even do that? Well, there are a few reasons why you would do that. First of all, in videography, you want to keep a slow shutter speed, for example, 1/50 of a second, and in daytime, it's not always possible. Boom, ND filters are here for the rescue. In photography, you want to create really cool motion blur effect. Same for that, you need a slow shutter speed. ND filters are going to be there also for that, whether it's a crowd blur in the city or actually getting that fluffy white water in the rivers or at the waterfall. This is the kind of filters you want to be using. Now, how do they work? It's pretty simple. Your ND will tell you if it's an ND 1, 2, 4 stops, and the ND strength is measured in stops. For each stop, you're halving the light. So 1 stop you half, then 2 stops you half and half. So it gets down very quickly. But what I want you to keep in mind is that if you're doing photography and you're just trying to keep your aperture fully wide open, for example, on this camera, I can go to 1/2000 of a second maximum. And at f2, I'm not able to do that in daytime because I'm maxing out the shutter speed. If you're not sure about your exposure triangle, watch this video on the camera basics, it will help you. But if we're talking the same language right now, well, I'm stuck at 1/2000 of a second and then my aperture has to go up. But with the ND filter, now I'm able to reduce the light, keep that aperture wide open at f2, and then adjust my shutter speed depending on what I'm actually needing and not to the cap. How do you choose an ND filter? Simple. If you're trying to achieve that, so basically keeping your aperture wide open, usually ND2 or 4 is largely enough in daytime. Now, if you're trying to create some interesting effects, for example, motion blur, crowd blur, ND2 to 4 could be enough to shoot at 1/5 of a second or 1/10 of a second. You just keep your f-stop a little bit higher and that will work. But if you're trying to get that water completely smooth smooth, which means you need to shoot maybe a few seconds long, then you want to hit those ND10, ND64, or even ND1000 if you're trying to do several minutes exposure. Watch out when you're reaching that limit of like long or like a very strong NDs, your camera may have a really hard time autofocusing. So before you put it on, focus where you want and then go with your lens in manual and then put back your ND filter, and that will help your camera. Maybe your modern camera is going to be a little better, but it's a little hack if you're struggling and you're on a tripod. And last but not least, I just want to mention it. I personally use in video a ND8 for kind of everything. It's a little weak sometimes in full bright daytime, but honestly, I just crank up a little bit my aperture and it works. So on this channel, probably 95% of all the videos outdoors you've seen have been shot with that ND8. Before we talk about variable NDs, let's talk about color cast. Those ND filters are created by basically changing the glass, right? It's not transparent, so there is a look. Sometimes, depending on the quality you buy, you may have a color cast that could be greenish, purplish, and I will really recommend you to invest if you take a fixed ND in something that is true colors or something that is as natural as possible. Maybe you can look up a few tests before. I personally have used the Nisi with love for many years, and I find that they're very accurate. So really check that. There's nothing worse than having an image that completely purple because you added a filter on top. And that brings us now to
my most hated filter.
I know. I have a lot of opinions on filters, but the VND, variable ND, is basically an adjustable ND filter. And the way it works is that it's pretty cool. You turn one way or the other to make it stronger or less strong. So you could go ND4 to ND6 by simply turning, right? So you're making it more or less dark. You can see here. You're making it more or less dark simply by turning, right? Zoop. Okay, great. So who is that for? Mainly videographers, honestly. If you're doing photography and you think you need a VND, you don't need a VND. Just stay with the ND filter, a fixed one, that is fine. Because also the range of VNDs is not going to be 2 to 1000. It's going to be 2 to 6, for example, or 3 to 9, or 6 to 9. It's not a massive range that you may want in photography. So in photography, maybe just get your ND4 and ND64. So the VND, I will say, works with basically two polarizing layers that are turning and making things more or less dark. And because of that, it creates huge amount of cast and interactions with the lights around you. I personally don't like it. Even the true color ones will always have a little bit of that polarizing issue. It's not full deal breaker, but really you gotta find the best ones. I was happily surprised with the Nisi ones again, but I will say I've had another brand that's in my hand, and honestly I couldn't use the footage sometimes because I would have green tints, the reflection on the car windows would go green, I would have some other things that would happen in the image, and I was like, wow, first of all, why are so many people recommending that filter? And second of all, why are my images like completely unusable? And I mean, I still use them because I didn't have a choice to go back to Tanzania and shoot, but I just felt so sad to shoot really high quality footage to have it just destroyed by the VND. So don't use a VND overall, even if you're doing videography. That's my 2 cents. Use an ND filter and ND8, ND10, and that's it, you're done. No need to go VND on it. There are more problems than solutions, in my opinion, with it. Also, if you're trying to stack them, then it gets even worse. It's better to, in my opinion, to stack the ND with the polarizer and play with these independently. Oh, and back in the days with the polarizer, you had a big X thing happening when it was too strong. So keep it also not too strong. Now let's get to the fun ones. So creative filters, those are fun and really can even sometimes make photography less boring and reconnect you with a little bit of the funness that it can be shooting without overthinking your pixel peeping and settings and sharpness and all that. I love it. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the black mist or white mist or glimmer. You may have heard of it a lot, or you may have heard of it without understanding what it is, what it does exactly. Basically, those diffusion filters soften micro contrast and add halation around highlights. What does it mean? You can get that glow around light sources or highlight points. So it is really cool to shoot at night with it. It becomes very cinematic. It also gives it a little bit nostalgic look sometimes, and it can break down a little bit of the sharpness of modern lenses and give it that softish feel. Now, there's black mist, white mist. What is the difference? Well, one of them is going to keep the darks darker, so all the shadows darker. That will be for the black mist, and the white mist will make everything kind of whiter, washed out. So if you don't want a too washed out feel, don't get the white mist, get the black mist, because it'll keep those shadows darker while still adding that halation around highlights and softening the image. You may be asking, how do I choose one? Well, the strength matters. So it can be half, a quarter, or 1/8. If you want something subtle, just get 1/8. 1/4 is as far as I would go. It gets a little strong, and half honestly is way too strong. It's very easy to make your lens look cheap if you're using a filter that's a little too strong. Try again to be all in balance when you're shooting and when you're using tools. Now let me know down below, have you used them or never? I remember at one point a lot of people were talking about them. I think it has died a little bit, but oh, they're always in my bag. I just love to throw one on my little camera and shoot with it all day, especially if I have people in my shot. It just softens things a lot, and that little glow in the nighttime is really cool, especially in Japan. Look at those shots. Next, we have the stars and streak filters. All right, are you able to see there are little lines right there on those filters? And what those filters do is basically they will interact with the direct light hitting, creating lines across and spreading that light hitting, right? That direct source of light, it's gonna spread it. I mean, look at the example. I think it speaks 1,000 words. So you can have some that do it in blue, some that do it in gold streak, and then you can have some that do stars. And you can also have anamorphic style filters if you don't have an anamorphic lens and you want the look. It's fun. I have a whole video where I'm using them. If you're curious, watch this one. Technically, it creates diffraction spikes from point light sources. So the more light sources, the more fun it gets. Could be a car, could be lampposts, could be anything else. But yeah, point light sources mainly. Fun filters. I enjoy them whenever you're bored and you want something a little unique. Throw them in your bag and go shoot with that at nighttime. You'll see, it's fun. Next up in the bag, the famous broken filter. I hope I didn't break another one. I actually realized I had another one that was broken. So the broken filter, what is that? What does it do? Well, it's a great tool that sometimes you don't intend to have. Why? You know what? It's because it's changing the diffraction of the light that's entering the lens. It creates a lot of refractions and flare shapes and duplicates. And I love to put it on my lens. And again, you want direct light hitting. And then you get really unique looks. And then I just turn it around to see how it's broken. You can tell here how this one was broken. I have a whole video on the day I discovered it was broken and how I started using it. Since then, I've been using it for years. I also use it just by holding it next to my lens like this and playing with having light hit it. And then I move around until I find an image that's kind of cool. I wouldn't recommend getting an expensive filter to break it. If you have a really cheap one that's a little broken, that's great. Like I just discovered this one is now a little broken, so that's gonna make for a second one. By the way, some of those effects, you can get them without even buying filters. You could, for example, just smudge your lens with a little bit of dirt and you can get similar effects, but here, we're talking about the filters. And then we've got the color filter. So that's for in-camera mood shift, especially for video or special photos that you're going to be stylized. And then you can really play with having everything have an orange vibe, you know, a sepia vibe, old school or whatever. I personally don't like them. I don't use them. I'm like, hey, I can do this in post-processing. This is very easy. But streaks is possible, but it looks different. And then mist filters also is not exactly the same when you're doing in post. So the color shift, easy after, but all the other ones I talked about, a little more difficult, if not impossible for the technical ones. So you may be asking, how do I choose? There's so many filters. Well, I suggest to you the LIT method. Just remember LIT. Light, is there too much? If yes, you grab an ND filter. I, intent, do I want to see through reflections or not? If yes, grab a CPL. And then T for texture, do I want it dreamy or sharp? If you want it dreamy, you grab that mist filter and that's it. And UV filters, again, only in violent conditions. But wait, remember, before you go and buy anything, there is something you need to know that will save you hundreds of dollars. First of all, you get those step-up rings that will allow you to adapt a wider filter on a smaller lens. Let's say I have a 60mm filter thread on my 85mm. I can put those step-up rings on it, and now I can put the 82mm filter I have on a 67mm lens. This is great. It's extremely practical, and it saved me a lot of money because I didn't have to buy the filters twice. I just bought it for my widest lens and I adapted downwards. And if you're wondering why you may have some vignetting, if you're using a UV filter and then you're stacking a CPL on top or an ND, you're creating basically a tunnel. You're just like stacking things on top of each other. It's like you're putting a lens hood that's not made as a lens hood, and now you're creating that vignetting, because if you continue it very far, you would just keep reducing your field of view in your lens. So please, if you do anything with a UV filter, get that UV filter out first before you put any other filters on top. Also, when you're purchasing a filter, just make sure you get the slimmest one possible. In my opinion, having something that thick is first more heavy in your bag and less helpful. Now I have a little cheat sheet for you. If you want for your everyday photography, grab it with the link in the description, and make sure you watch this video to learn everything about how to get sharp photos. Watch this one if you want to avoid the huge photography mistakes to get photos you love. And remember, to get those photos, you need to get out there, go shoot, try something different, try something new. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.